My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why someone should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to drive remarkable business results. In this episode, we're honored to have Wesely Kerlin of Optitude as our guest. Brian is a good friend. We'll talk about that. Those of you who are regular listeners know that this podcast originates in Pittsburgh, although it's broadcast all over the interwebs. And Brian is also originally from Pittsburgh. More importantly, for all of you listening, he is an entrepreneur and a sales leader with more than 20 years experience with everything from startups to second stage companies, the top tier Fortune 50 companies. He has an attitude that was probably honed, at least in part, by his teenage years in hockey. Grit, plus an approachable attitude. Doesn't every sales leader, successful salesperson need to have an approachable attitude, right? This gives him a unique capacity to lead others to get things done when it really counts. And Brian's led some really large sales organizations. We'll talk about that. So he grew up in the heart of the Steel City. Blue collar hustle here in Pittsburgh is a way of life, and that certainly describes Brian. His parents taught him, if you want something in life, you have to go out and earn it the old-fashioned way by working hard every day. And that's led Brian to live, work, and travel all over the United States. But this lucky dude, he's called Denver home for more than a decade. So I'm jealous every time I go out there to visit. That is one heck of a place. Love Pittsburgh, but boy, Denver is cool too, just to look out the window and see mountains. And Brian, as you know, we have mountains here in Pittsburgh too. They're just really worn down. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome, my friend. Anything that I missed in introducing you, you think our audience should know?
Paul, I think you covered it, and I'm really excited, and I feel grateful to be a guest here on the podcast. But yeah, definitely great to be from Pittsburgh. But it's wonderful to reside and live in the Rocky Mountain area. So looking forward to seeing you come out and visit again soon.
Yeah, pretty soon. I hope that'll be really good. Just in the last month, as Brian knows, because we got to see each other. I was out there 3 times, and each time it was another snowstorm. I was either there before or after, so that's not bad, I'll tell you. Brian, we always ask our guests on Storylines Live about their capital S story. Obviously, this is the thing that drives the entire podcast and our business. It's our secret sauce. We're always curious to know when we have a guest on, which of those 4 questions that the capital S story answers are most important to where you are right now in your journey, buying from you, working with you, partnering with you, or investing in you.
Yeah, I love the Capital S story and a bit of fan, obviously, you and the team for quite a while. And for us, where we're at in our growth journey, we're really focused on how people buy from us. All of them are important, as obviously you know, in the Word Right team. We have great partners. We've been lucky enough to find great team players here at Optitude, but I think at this stage we're looking really to continue to expand our impact in the world and having people understand how to buy from us.
Yeah, folks, take a good listen to this episode because I think you'll learn a lot about the power of having the right sales assistance and sales leadership in growing your organization. Now, let's start there, Brian. How does your own personal story, and we shared a little bit of it from your bio, how does it help you in what you're doing today?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I feel like the major underpinning of why we even started Optitude came from a couple decades of experience as early on as a sales individual contributor, which, I believe, and still to this day, that no organization really has an ability to achieve any sort of value unless they acquire new clients or acquire, new revenue. And so it's kind of the starting point, the tip of the spear, per se, of any organization. And so when I started my post-college career and doing that work, I started to really get a sense of what it means to do that for an organization. And then secondly, for myself, I think there was a tremendous amount of excitement around helping clients solve problems. And I've carried that through. And when we started Optitude, as we talk more about it, that's kind of where the underpinning of what we do to help B2B professional service companies try to improve.
What led you to sales, Brian?
I think, I wish I, had some sort of grand plan I could share with you, but I remember in my earliest days, I was trying to figure out, like I think anyone post-college, is where are my strengths? What do I enjoy doing? And what can I naturally do maybe better than some people, better than the average? And it didn't strike me that sales was my first kind of idea. I actually was thinking about some sort of field of healthcare, medicine, physician assistant schools were popular, physical therapy. I was an athlete all the way through my younger years. So I was kind of drawn to this sports, athletic, healthcare sector. And I spent some time trying to learn more about it and realized quickly, gosh, maybe more schooling isn't really for me. And so the next opportunity was to think about how I could use my ability to leverage performance, which is obviously sales related. If you perform, there's a result attached to that performance, and do that with a way that I'm much of a high achiever. So I set goals and knew that those two things maybe kind of would be incorporated around sales jobs, and talked to a few mentors in my life, and they kind of pointed me in that direction. And that's where I got started.
Where was your first sales job?
My first sales job was a company called Forest Labs. It was a small company. I think it was based out of New York. It's been a handful of years now, Paul, but I think their headquarters was New York. And they were a small kind of med tech healthcare company. And I remember interviewing, up and down the East Coast to try to get my first break. Right?
Yeah.
My first my last interview, a gentleman who gave me the opportunity. The unique thing that I don't know how I figured this out. Maybe I read it in a book. I probably did. I'm a voracious book reader. I took all of the time at that time, which is, this will date me a bit, but they would send you, when you didn't get a job, they would send you a formal letter saying you weren't accepted in this particular role, but please, think about us and apply in the future. Well, those were sadly enough stacking up in my first attempts at trying to get a sales job. And they were stacking up to a point, I want to say half a dozen of them came in, and then next thing you know, a seventh and an eighth. I just couldn't figure out why. And so I got this kind of this bent, this angle that I was going to take in this interview. It happened to be the job that I started with, and I took all those denial letters into the final interview and said, "Listen," his name was Mark, and I said, "Mark, regardless of whether you hire me or not, I will tell you that a lot of people before you said that I might not be good enough to take on roles like this in different organizations. But I think you get the opportunity to realize that the other 7 or 8 people will be really upset when you hire me because they're likely competitors, and how I'll be able to prove them wrong that you hiring me was the right decision. So you can either be another letter or you can actually say yes." So it was a little bit of a hard close. I had nothing to lose at that point, and that's where my career started.
Geez, Brian, I've never heard that story. That's a great story.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm going to talk about that because storytelling in sales is really an emerging trend that people are paying attention to. Well, we'll get into that in a sec. But just to give the audience a little bit more color on your career, what's the largest organization you've worked in for sales?
Yeah, gosh, I think they're both at the top relative to just size and revenue. They both happen to be healthcare
Yep.
specific
Good team there.
companies. Yeah. Johnson and Johnson was one of the companies for a period of years, and then the other one was Stryker, both in the healthcare, medtech, pharma, and biotech space. Both, I think, large and very positively presented in brands around the world relative to healthcare. And I was lucky enough to get opportunities in both those organizations, as I said, as an individual contributor for a shorter period of time, and then I kind of took a position of taking on leading sales teams and building sales teams, and that in itself was its own set of learnings.
Well, we're going to get into that in this episode for sure. What's the largest sales team that you led in one of those roles?
I think at the earliest days of pivoting to working for Stryker, we had a small division I was a part of. And I think at that stage, there might have been 20 plus, maybe 20 to 30 that I was responsible for. We were growing, and then I was not going to be responsible for that over a long period of time. But that was probably over the limit, if that's a fair way of saying it. It was a flat organization. What I mean by that is all those individuals reported into me in a particular region of the country. And as we were evolving, it was amazing because we were growing so fast. We couldn't keep up with demand. And sometimes as a sales leader, that's a good problem to have. So I cut my teeth in trying to figure out how to balance that all.
That's really great. We always like to ask our guests as well, what's the role of storytelling? What's their take on it and what they do every day? And I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Brian, there's a lot out there in the sales field right now about the importance of storytelling in sales. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it always has to be incorporated into the relationships that you're building with your prospective clients or your current clients. Because I think let's be real. Everybody, regardless of the business venture that they're in, is living a story or taking a journey in their life. And while we'd love to all hope that they may not be struggling at any point or dealing with any sort of particular problems, but that's what salespeople do. They solve problems, and you have to be able to, one, understand your prospective prospect or client, or their story, and understanding the ups and downs, the twists and the turns, and where their challenges lie. And then you got to be able to turn that story into making sure that they feel like you understand them, and so you can maybe even be a possible solution to help be the hero maybe in that story.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, and a lot of what I've seen on this topic, and I think it's relevant, as a self-proclaimed storytelling expert. Some of the terms that we use in sales are maybe just a little bland and too obvious, like case studies, right? When you're selling, show me an example of somebody just like me who hired your company or used your product and had success, right? Well, that's a story, right? You're demonstrating through a narrative that this is going to work for them, that you're going to solve their problem, right? But as you pointed out, that's the sort of thing that good salespeople have been doing probably since the beginning of time. Right?
Yeah, I would say you're probably right. In a lot of ways. If you want to even use faith and religion, I think some of the
Oh
best
yeah.
stories are in the biggest books.
Yeah, I would absolutely 100% agree with you. Folks, stay tuned because we're going to be right back and we're going to dig in more of what Brian Kerlin does, his organization, Optitude, to create success for the organizations he works with. We'll be right back.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome back, folks, to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. We call it your capital S story. In this episode, we're honored to have with us Brian Kerlin of Optitude. Welcome back, Brian.
Thanks, Paul. Enjoyed the conversation so far. Thank you.
Likewise. It's going to get better, Brian. You know why?
Why is that?
We're going to talk about you.
Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be, hope all of the audience is sitting comfortably in the chair because it's going to be a good one.
Well, that's really, I think that's an important role for any business-focused podcast. The listeners should have the opportunity to learn something new. And I asked you on because I believe that what you do is extremely beneficial. So give our audience a sense. What is it that you do for your clients? How do you serve the people that you serve?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think first and foremost, it's always great to be clear about who we serve or who we'd like to continue to serve. And that is that our business at Optitude is focused on first-time founders in the B2B professional services space that have gotten to a place where they might not have built the professional sales systems and processes behind their current business. And that shows up in a number of different ways relative to challenges, needs, and growth. And a lot of times these companies around the country, and even lucky enough, we've had a few international clients, usually have a challenge. This shows up between 1 and 10 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, we can get in and kind of talk through specifically how we have some different service offerings to help them. But that's at core who our core customer is, and we're excited to continue to try to help serve around the country.
That's really great, and that's very important because what you're talking about, I believe in a conversation we had one time, you described it in a related way. You said to me words to the effect of that your ideal client is somebody where the founder may have been doing most of the selling, and it's time for them to get out of that and to start thinking about having somebody else do that or systematizing the sales process, right?
That's exactly right. That's one of the major core symptoms we see when working with some of our clients.
Now, you've obviously worked with some really large organizations in your career, and you've led some good-sized teams for some really, really big brands. What led you to start Optitude? What was it that caused you to say, okay, I've been at Johnson & Johnson or Stryker or whatever. What I really want to do is help these kinds of companies.
Yeah, it's a fun story. It might not be we have full time to tell it all, but I've been in the small kind of way in a portion of my life. I've realized that I'm married to an entrepreneur. She's been successful for a couple decades in that work. As I described the scenario of the clients we like to work with or hope to work with, she kind of fell into some of that same challenge. She's a professional expert in interior design, and she has a firm that, as it continued to grow, she, like a lot of thought leaders in the professional service space, where reason why people worked with her because of her, right? Because of her
Yes.
network, her brand, et
Yep.
cetera, which is amazing in itself. And as I, explored that conversation more with her, and then I spent some time volunteering actually pro bono with earlier stage companies that were much smaller, as you heard my background. And I
Sure.
found a tremendous amount of passion, energy, and excitement in working with those founders. Because like you and others, now I'm into that, to that camp of you start something because you have a set of expertise, you believe wholeheartedly that you can
Mm.
help other people solve problems, you're passionate about those problems, and you want to see the results and the improvement for those clients. And at the core, that became more apparent as the next chapter for me. And I realized early on that if I formulated that into a business, I'd likely have some success. And I was lucky enough to start in 2018 and finding a
Wow.
few clients. We've learned a lot in the last 6 years.
Oh,
What
for
we started
sure.
with and what we are now are obviously a bit different.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, I'm so glad I did it, and I love working with entrepreneurs. It's a special group of people.
That's really cool. That's a great story. Uh, you know, just for our listeners and certainly my own experience too, this has got to be one of the most crowded areas of advisory or professional services. Throw a rock in any major city and you're going to probably hit a sales consultant, right? So what
Mm.
makes you different from your competitors?
Yeah, it is funny. And throwing a rock, or maybe today's world, you point and click, right? You click a
That's
few,
right.
double click down
Trashing an
into.
email, an unsolicited cold
That's
email.
right. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And listen, I feel like there's a couple things that may be happening relative to that in the world that we operate in Optitude. Number one is if you see that many people in that space,
Yeah.
that's likely demonstrating there's a significant problem that's pervasive
Mm,
across the market, right? So that's kind of number one. And so that's a good thing. The second is that I think you're touching on, and we agree with 100% as well, is we have differentiated ourselves right from the beginning based on our point of view and philosophy around what it takes to actually grow as a leader and as an organization in professional
mhm,
services. What I mean by that is that if you want someone that's out there that's going to help from a transaction standpoint in sales training or coming up with a sales process or helping you organize, then I think there's, like you said, I think there's many, many companies that have had probably years of success longer than us that do that.
mhm,
Where we should really kind of put our stamp on is that we believe in something that you can do that work, which is performance based, but
mhm.
you also have to work with the leader and the founder and understand they have to build capacity as well. And that theme or that principle is called in our organization the inside out principle. It has two core components: performance, that is related to strategies, systems, and practices that have to get built from a revenue system inside the organization to make it more repeatable.
Right.
And then on the capacity side, it's working and having that founder realize that they have to put themselves in a position to have greater direction, discipline, and development to
Mm.
eventually remove themselves from being the only rainmaker in the company. And
Yes.
the inside out principle together, those two areas, when improved over time, will likely have a greater chance of future proofing the growth of your business. And so that's kind of where we've placed our differentiation, and it's continue to prove out in the market. You need both, and you can't just be a kind of a top performance revenue driver. You have to have the capacity piece too.
Yeah, that is such a common uh observation that people will make. Oh, that founder has founder syndrome. They can't let go of things. And certainly that'll relate to operations uh and other aspects of the company as well as sales. But your point is really spot on. And I love what you said about your philosophy and the two parts of it coming together and helping founders to realize that, and a lot of them aren't, sadly, they're not disciplined. And they need to get there. I mean, when it comes to this, right?
Yeah.
And then turn the thing over, right? Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
yeah. What brings you the most enjoyment or satisfaction in your work?
Gosh, I mean, it's probably evolved in the
Mhm.
earliest days where it was just, myself placing a shingle out there and getting to know the marketplace and bringing on my first few clients. Those days were just about making sure that not only delivered great results and had great work, but we had a chance to build relationships with some of our earliest clients. And still today, that's still important. It's still satisfying to me. I think
Right.
where I've started to see the business evolve to is that we have a greater mission. We almost have I don't want to call it a crusade, but a movement around helping more first-time founders break through this conundrum of building capacity for growth. And what I mean by that specifically is, gosh, there's so many amazing entrepreneurs that have many, many years built their businesses, but get kind of plateaued in certain stages of growth. And we see it usually in this second stage of their business. And second stage could be 10 years, could be 5 years,
Mhm.
could be 20 years. And there isn't enough built behind them to sustain enough consistent predictability and growth. And we feel that's a disservice to the business world and to the entrepreneurial community at large, because I think that the backbone of what we see in this world is from a business perspective is built around those entrepreneurs that we like to serve, and I think you guys do as well. Uh,
Absolutely.
taking taking a chance and getting out there and
Mhm.
making a change, making a difference. And so I think that's probably what fuels us the most is working with individuals like that.
Love that, Brian. Love that. That is really great. And I like the way you phrase that. You called it a mission. I'd call it a story, a reason
That's
for
true.
being.
That's
But that's
probably the
just
better one.
me. That's
I think you're
probably.
right. It is our story. It's exactly right. It's our story of why we exist and why, more importantly, we want to keep serving the community.
Yep. That's the simplest definition of a story, Brian. It's a narrative that answers the question why. And so that's your the answer to your why. That's wonderful. Uh, yeah, I always like to ask if you could share a success story, even if you can't name the
Hmm.
company, just to give a little more of a picture for our audience of how you help people.
Yeah, totally. I think we'll maybe give you two
Hmm.
short
Sure.
stories. The first one is that because of the different services we offer, we do a small kind of VIP, very important project
Hmm.
boutique work. We don't have a lot of clients relative to that space just because it's very time and labor intensive, even though it's an important part of our practice.
Right.
There was a market research firm that we had the pleasure of getting a chance to know a few years
Hmm.
back. Company had been around about 8 to 10 years since the founder had started it. Got to that same level of growth that you and I've been talking about here for the last 15, 20 minutes. And then had one person on their team that was kind of semi-dedicated to helping
Hmm.
acquiring new customers, but there wasn't like and I guess in the sales terms, there wasn't like a playbook. So this company was in a little bit of a fits and starts, right? Where they
Yep.
have some level of success in a quarter, and then it would drop in a quarter, and there wasn't enough ability to understand predictability and how they could be more consistent, which is obviously some of the work we do. And so as we got to know them, we engaged in a relationship and put together what we believe would be a not only helpful scope of work, but to build what it is that you and I just talked about. Number one is how can we get more consistency for
Hmm.
that founder? Second, how can we create more and improved performance, right? Top line as well as potentially profitability. And
Right.
then third, how can we really help that founder start to slowly remove themselves? It's not like it's one day that you're on, the next day you're off. Being a business development
Yes.
kind of rainmaker, you're always going to hold a
Yes.
part of that role as a founder.
Hmm.
But through not only our first 6 months, we ended up extending for another 6 months. We helped them build a new process, leverage the technology they used to help kind of create this sort of KPIs and accountability and system that would allow it to be a little bit smoother. That firm not only had some of its best performance over that time, there was a chance to also bring back that team member that was responsible for sales business development that more now could take over and see more clarity on how to drive
Wow.
the business forward. It was amazing work, and it's weird because while we are there to help strategy and systematize and create kind of accountability, they really roll up their sleeves and do the work. And so we got to give them a lot of credit. They're a successful business. They've been awarded a number of different times on their performance in the industry they're in. And I would say, the founder today and I are still close, and we're lucky enough to have them as a client. So that's probably what we call our VIP work, right? Very important projects, small groups. And then, as you know, Paul, we also kind of built another delivery of that sort of work, and we did it more in an academy approach, which means just one to many. We were able to have a mission to accomplish the work with more people we could get our help and support out to. And so last year we were able to have a group of individuals, and in today's world, live and virtual.
Wow,
And,
that's right.
We had our first international client that was able to participate in that work, and some of the same results. It just gets delivered a bit differently because it's in a group setting. But one of the things we learned about that work is how those founders work together to see what each other are going through, and that creates a fabric of strength and cohesiveness that they can kind of learn from each other quicker, which helps to hopefully get the results faster.
Yeah, kind of a peer support and best practice sharing, right? Everybody can see
exactly right
what everybody else is doing. That's great.
That's exactly right. So we've been lucky. We've really had amazing clients over the years, and we're excited about the future as well. I think there's a bright future for what we're doing here at Optitude.
I absolutely agree, Brian. And I think you've got a really, really great company and a really, really great story / mission. Is there anything that you think our audience would benefit from knowing that I haven't asked you about?
There's probably only one thing left that I want to make sure that the audience is aware of. And this is one of the things we believe very deeply in regarding the work we do. And I think you touched on a little bit of how do we differentiate ourselves a few minutes ago. One of the things that starts all of our client relationships the right way is what we call getting a alignment around their growth readiness, the client's growth readiness. And so we developed a simple tool. It's called the Growth Readiness Score. And it's an assessment that if you go to our website, optitude.co, you'll be able to participate in really a 5-minute kind of Q&A that's in a form. And then after that's completed, anyone that completes it will get a 6 to 7 page summary of their results directly sent to their email box that will go over a little bit what we're talking about, give them a sense of what they should be paying attention to in their thinking about their readiness to grow.
Well, that's great, Brian. And you took us right where I was going to go next, which is how people can reach you. And that's at optitude.co, right?
That's correct.
Anywhere else that's good for them to reach
you? I think LinkedIn is a great channel for us. You can go to our homepage relative to just LinkedIn, Optitude on LinkedIn, or you could look me up, Brian.Kerlin there on LinkedIn, and I'll happily respond to messages, DMs, if you feel you want to continue the conversation.
Brian, that is truly great. We will link to all that in the show notes. We'll also link to the growth assessment that Brian mentioned, so that if you're interested in that, you can take it a test drive there and get a 6 or 7 page report. Brian, it's been great to have you on this episode of Storylines Live. Thank you so much. Folks, as always, thank you for being loyal listeners, a great audience for Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. Your capital S story. We'll see you next time on Storylines Live.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The Carrie Barrett Show. Carrie, tell listeners what to expect from the big program.
We talk about everything from media training and virtual executive presence, tips and tricks, but also mindset, confidence, and how you can leverage those newfound skills.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
You can go to my website, www.carriebarrett.com. You can find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or you can search for The Carrie Barrett Show wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.